In this video, I want to show you something that my Singer 237, this one is from Vermont, can do. Now, a few changes have happened that I want to mention. YouTube is changing the way it allows people to upload videos. So those changes, if you don't upload them yourself and you just watch them, you may run into differences in channels and things they're allowing us to do and not allowing us to do. That's one thing. Second thing is, as far as quilts for veterans, I have a lot of commercial yarn and of a couple of different kinds. And I have recently discovered that all of it is made outside of the United States. Now, I think I knew that before about Lion Brand Fisherman wool, but for some reason it didn't quite click until last week when I realized that most of the yarns that I have are not made in America. So a lot of the items that I was going to make for veterans, I just in good conscience can't give things made in China. I'm not going to knit socks with wool made in China and then give them to American veterans. So I can't also throw it all out. So I've had to change my thinking a little bit, and what I'm going to be doing is weaving fabric with those yarns and then using it up. And hopefully, in the meantime, I'm also going to be spinning my own wool, because I did find a company that carries American yarn sourced from America. It's called Made in America Yarns, and they have a website if you want to look at it. But the best way to use American products is to buy them and process it myself. So what that's going to do is make anything I do for veterans take longer, because I'm going to be spinning my own yarn. But in the meantime, this is a blanket that I had woven a couple of years ago. It's just kind of a scrap blanket for myself. Now this is going to come in with another thing I'm going to be doing is some sumac weaving, which is knot weaving. And flat weave, which this is the thinnest fabric with weaving. Sumac weaving is usually used for rugs, and it's much thicker. It's not quite as thick as the braids from a spool knitter, but it is thick. So what I'm doing is changing my machines around. I'm going to need my 237 or the brother for the zigzag feature, because this won't fit underneath the automatic zigzagger on the vintage machines. And what I'm doing with this blanket, a way to seam wovens is just treat them like fabric, put a regular seam in them, which you see right here, and now I'm going over it with a zigzag stitch, which will hold that seam allowance down. And so when you pick up this blanket to use it as a blanket or a shawl, right now this is obvious because there's a seam down the middle. Once I tack this down with the zigzagger, that won't even be an issue. Now, I uploaded a bunch of videos for my normal way of making blankets, which may replace the quilts, for quilts for veterans, and that's on a 3-foot backstrap loom. Unfortunately, even though it's fairly nice out today, the ground is frozen, and my better way of warping that I can't do with the ground frozen because I do it outside. So what I may be doing is weaving smaller pieces of fabric that are about 3.5 feet by 12 inches wide, and then piecing them together into larger blankets. And I have an indoor pipe loom that I would use for that. But if I do that, I will need to know that this seaming method works. So Because I need the 237, what I've done is move the treadle back over here where I generally work, and I'm going to use the treadle machine instead of the electric. So this is a double thick woven seam allowance and the 237. And sometimes there's a loop that gets under it, but you can see how nice that actually goes down. And I had matched up the yarns in the pieces of this before, but even if you don't match up the yarns and have just random colors through it, if you use a neutral thread, this is a way to very securely seam any kind of woven pieces. So this will do this just fine. And one other thing I want to mention is I may be doing some sumac tapestry weaving as well. And let me show you a small one. This is one of them that I did called Lightning. Now this is all knots. Sumac weaving is knots for rugs. This one I did not also put a background plain weave in there, and I left the slits like this instead of sewing them together. But what I need to do, I have several of these, and I need to weave a sashing and frame each of these in cloth and take off the bamboo poles. And if I do that, I can then stitch the sashings together like a quilt. So that's another application where a 237 or the Brother LX3014 can take, on this I'll probably zigzag a sashing on here. I'll weave a sashing to the right size, place it next to this, and zigzag it on there. And then I can use any of these as a quilt block. Now this one's fairly straight, but sometimes what happens with sumac weaving is that you get your edges that pull in. So on some of them, I'll be using the sashing to actually straighten the tapestry as well. So those are some projects I'm going to be doing. And I have to really think about the weaving of the blankets for veterans because of the amount of time it takes to spin that much yarn. So, you know, buy American. And I've always bought American for the items that are specifically for the veterans until I realized that my favorite yarn for 20 years was made in China. You know, I went to bed the other day, I woke up in the morning and I went, it's made in China. I can't use it. So it caused a major rethinking of everything as far as the quilts for veterans. And in the meantime, I'm going to be weaving my own fabric and working on my sumac tapestries and using at least this machine in the treadle to piece the woven items together, to put the sashings on. And if I do weave blanket sections and then sew them together, this will probably sew the blankets together as well. Now it's getting caught a little bit on loops, and I don't want to shake the camera, so I'm not going too fast here, but I can zip right along with this and just put that seam down very quickly. It's one more reason to pick up a vintage machine. In this case, the Singer 237s are wonderful. They're one of the few zigzag machines that can be used in a treadle, which makes them doubly wonderful.